Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, I'm a grandfather of 5, and as a grandfather, I care about what's in the food my grandchildren eat. And I think all you moms and dads and grandmothers and grandfathers out there do too. So how do we know what's in our children and grandchildren's food? Well, we look at food labels, of course, and there are 2 labels that tell us a lot about the food we plan to purchase. Now, there's the combined Nutritional Facts label and ingredient list. And with that information, we can determine whether the food contains too much sugar or too many chemicals whose names we can't pronounce. And importantly, the Nutritional Facts label and ingredient list are included on virtually all processed foods because it's required by law to be there. In other words, it's mandatory. Now, the second label that tells us about our food is a label informing us as to what country's food production and food safety laws the food product was subjected to when it was grown, raised, or manufactured. Now, that label, of course, is a country of origin label, otherwise known as a COOL label. Now, this COOL label can tell us whether the food was produced in a developing country, where there may be inadequate infrastructure to ensure the product's wholesomeness and safety, or produced in a country with a history of corrupt practices, such as in Brazil, where food safety officials were found to have been bribed while tainted beef was being exported around the world, or produced in a country where animal diseases remain endemic, including such diseases as foot and mouth disease and tuberculosis. So these 2 food labels, the nutritional label and the country of origin label or COOL label, help you determine what's in the food you're feeding your children or grandchildren and in what country the food was produced, which can give you an idea of the relative wholesomeness and safety of the food. Now, the nutritional label and ingredient list are universal. They're required to be on virtually all processed food items. But country of origin labels are only on some foods, such as imported foods that are sold in the very same package as when they first entered the United States, and on foods including fresh fruits and vegetables, wild and farm-raised fish and shellfish, chicken, lamb, goat meat, peanuts, pecans, macadamia nuts, and ginseng. But what's ominously missing from the mandatory country of origin labeling requirement is beef. And the reason beef is not labeled is because the multinational beef packers don't want you to know where your children and grandchildren's beef is produced or what's in it. So let me explain. Beef takes a long time to get to your grocery store. That's because cattle take a long time to grow, up to about 2 years for conventional corn-fed beef. But beef, including imported beef, can come from cattle that are much older. They can be 10 years old or older. And that means that beef is a product of the conditions the animal was subjected to while it grew for years before it arrives at your grocery store. Now, the United States imposes many restrictions on the types of vaccines and medication that can be used on cattle as they grow. For example, the U.S. requires ranchers to obtain a veterinarian's approval to feed antibiotics to their cattle. But the U.S. does not require this restriction on foreign cattle or foreign beef. And some foreign countries use medication on cattle that is prohibited in the United States. Now, several consumer groups, including the Consumers Union, wrote the Food and Drug Administration and the U.S. Department of Agriculture a while back, informing them that some foreign countries were indeed continuing to use medicines on cattle that had been prohibited in the United States. And you might recall when ESPN.com news services warned NFL players that meat produced in China and Mexico may be contaminated with the banned substance clenbuterol. The point is this: how and where cattle are raised has a huge impact on the safety and wholesomeness of beef. And beef produced in the United States is the best beef in the world, and it's produced under the best of conditions. Now, I want my grandchildren to eat beef produced in the United States, and I would think that you would too. But until we break the multinational beef packers' stranglehold over Congress, there won't be any mandatory country of origin labels on beef. So help us break that stranglehold. If you're a parent or grandparent like me, call your members of Congress and tell them you want them to pass mandatory country of origin labeling for beef. It's Senate Bill 2716. You want that so you can choose where and how the beef you feed your children is produced and what's in that beef. So please go to our website at www.labelourbeef.com to learn more. You know, sometimes it takes getting mad before we act, and now is certainly the time to act. With that, have a productive week. Thank you and goodbye.